I spent decades being called weak. I was left alone in the rain, like I was worth nothing. I discovered lies, debts, and manipulations hidden for years. My pain turned into courage, my loneliness turned into purpose. What nobody imagined is that I'd transform silence into voice and pain into liberation, and that my story would become a chain of courage for other women. But to understand how all this happened, I'll tell you how it all began. You know that moment when you realize your entire life has been a lie? Well, it happened to me on a cold October night in a supermarket parking lot in Seattle. The rain was falling like the sky was collapsing, and there I was, soaked to the bone, shivering from cold and anger. Michael had left me alone on purpose, simply because I talked too much during dinner. 30 years of marriage, and he abandoned me in the rain like I was trash. My heart was beating erratically while I tried to understand what had just happened. It was total humiliation. But the worst part wasn't the freezing rain hitting my face. The worst part was realizing that this wasn't new. It was just another episode of an emotional story I'd been denying for decades. Michael was always like that, you know? Controlling, cold, manipulative. But when you're inside the situation, it's like you're wearing foggy glasses. You can't see clearly. I remember when we were young, he seemed so protective, so attentive. Over time, that attention turned into surveillance. That protection turned into absolute control. He decided what I wore, who I talked to, where I went. And me? Well, I accepted everything, because I thought a good wife should be like that. My elderly mother used to tell me that marriage was about commitment, about weathering storms together. But she didn't know that my storm had a first and last name. That night, shivering in the parking lot, I saw the headlights of a car approaching. It was an elegant woman, with perfectly arranged white hair, driving an old but impeccable car. She stopped right in front of me, rolled down the window, and said in a firm voice, "Get in the car, dear. Nobody deserves to be like this." I hesitated for a second, but something in her voice calmed me. I got into the warm car, with the smell of lavender and old wood, and started crying. It wasn't just crying, it was a collapse of stored-up years. Isabel Crawford, that's how she introduced herself, didn't ask questions. She just drove in silence, taking me to a place I didn't even know existed. A historic mansion in the Queen Anne neighborhood, with towers, stained glass windows, and an aura of mystery that made me forget, for a few minutes, about my own pain. The house was something out of an old movie. Solid wood doors, staircases that seemed infinite, libraries with books that smelled like history. Isabel took me to a room with a lit fireplace, brought me hot tea and a soft blanket. Only then did I realize she was blind. Her blue eyes were fixed on some distant point, but she moved through the house with impressive precision. "You're safe here," she said, as if she knew exactly what I was going through. And you know what's crazier? I felt safe for the first time in years. There, in that silent mansion, away from Michael, away from the lies, I could finally breathe. But I still didn't understand the depth of what was happening to me. In the following days, Isabel let me explore the house freely. That's when I found the Crawford family's private library full of old diaries. One of them, written by Lenora Crawford, Isabel's grandmother, caught my attention. The yellowed pages told an emotional story that seemed frighteningly familiar. Lenora described a suffocating marriage, a controlling husband who isolated her from the world. She wrote about humiliations, about how she felt invisible, about how she was afraid to speak, to exist. It was like I was reading my own life, but written 100 years earlier. That gave me goosebumps from head to toe. The patterns of abuse weren't new. They crossed generations, destroying women who, just like me, thought they had no way out. I started having terrible nightmares. I'd dream I was trapped in a glass cage, screaming, but nobody heard me. I'd wake up sweaty, with my heart racing, feeling the weight of 30 years of silence. Isabel always appeared in those moments, as if she had a sixth sense. She'd sit on the edge of my bed and say things that seemed simple, but that exploded inside me. "Eleanor, you're not weak. You're a survivor, and survivors learn to fly when they realize the chains were imaginary." I wanted to believe her, but there was still a part of me that felt like an ungrateful daughter for being there, hidden, away from home. After all, Michael was my husband. Shouldn't I be by his side? But then I'd remember the rain, the way he looked at me with contempt before speeding up and leaving me behind. and something inside me started to crack. It wasn't just anger. It was a painful awareness that my entire life had been shaped by fear. Fear of being alone, fear of being called crazy, fear of not being enough. Michael had planted those seeds in me from the beginning, and I watered them for decades. Isabel showed me that abuse isn't just physical aggression. It's also financial control, social isolation, the erasure of your own identity. I'd never thought about that. For me, abuse was something that happened to other women, not me. One night, while we read Lenora's diaries together, Isabel told me her own story. Her ex-husband, Richard Collins, had been charming at first, just like Michael. But over time, he became a suffocating shadow. He pushed Isabel away from her daughter Claire, manipulating situations, creating fights, planting doubts. "It took me years to rebuild my relationship with my daughter," Isabel said, her voice choked. "And even now, there are scars that'll never completely disappear." I held her hand, feeling the pain she carried. It was like looking at a mirror of the future. What could happen to me if I stayed trapped? If I went back to Michael, I'd just be another broken woman, another sad story nobody would hear. That night, lying in the guest bedroom of the mansion, I looked at the high, ornate ceiling. Moonlight came through the stained glass windows, creating colorful patterns on the walls. I felt small, but at the same time, for the first time, I felt a spark of something new, something I didn't even know how to name yet. Maybe it was hope, maybe it was anger, or maybe it was simply the realization that my life didn't have to be like this. Isabel had given me a gift, time and space to think, and the more I thought, the more I understood that going back to Michael would be betraying myself. It would be betraying that girl who once dreamed of true love, not emotional prison. But understanding this was one thing. Having the courage to act was something completely different. When I woke up the next morning, I found Isabel in the kitchen, making coffee. The smell brought me a strange memory. My elderly mother making coffee on Sunday mornings before everything fell apart. "Eleanor," Isabel said without turning around, "today's the first day of the rest of your life, and I promise you won't go through this alone." I swallowed my tears, but felt a tightness in my chest. For the first time, someone was truly on my side, not out of obligation, not out of interest, but out of genuine empathy. I didn't know it yet, but that moment in the Crawford Mansion kitchen was planting the seed of a transformation that would change not only my life, but the lives of several other women. The question was, would I have enough courage to water that seed, or would I let fear drag me back into the darkness? Living in Isabel's mansion was like being in another world. In the first few days, I still expected Michael to show up banging on the door, demanding that I come back, but he didn't know where I was, and that feeling of invisibility was both liberating and terrifying. Isabel had a calm routine: breakfast at 7, reading in the morning, walks through the garden in the afternoon. I tried to keep up, but my mind was always agitated, replaying the last 30 years like they were a movie in slow motion. Each scene showed me something I hadn't seen before. Each memory revealed a manipulation I'd ignored. It was like I was waking up from sleepwalking that lasted decades, and the awakening hurt more than any physical wound. Isabel had a unique way of teaching me without seeming like she was teaching. She didn't give sermons or lectures, she simply shared stories. One afternoon, while we were having tea on the porch, she told me about social isolation. "Eleanor, do you realize how many friends you had when you met Michael?" I stopped to think. I had several. Sarah, Jennifer, Amanda. They all disappeared over the years. "And today," she continued, I swallowed hard. I had nobody. Michael always found an excuse. They were bad influences. They didn't understand our marriage. They were jealous. And I, like an ungrateful daughter who abandons family for a man, had left them all behind. Isabel nodded, as if she could read my thoughts. "That wasn't your choice, dear. It was his strategy." Emotional control was another point that Isabel dissected with surgical precision. She made me realize how Michael used my love against me. Whenever I questioned something, he'd get sad, hurt, making me feel guilty for hurting his feelings. "You're being dramatic," he'd say, or "You've always been too sensitive." Over time, I stopped trusting my own emotions. I thought I was crazy, that I was exaggerating, that the problem was in me. Isabel explained that this has a name: gaslighting. "They make you doubt your own sanity," she said, with a calmness that contrasted with the storm growing inside me. And then I understood. Michael wasn't just controlling, he was a strategist. Each of his moves had a purpose: to keep me small, dependent, invisible. Financial sabotage was the hardest part to swallow. Isabel encouraged me to think about money, about independence. "Do you have your own bank account?" I shook my head no. "Do you know how much Michael earns?" No. "Do you have access to the family investments?" Also no. Each no was a stab of shame. How had I been so blind? Michael always said he took care of everything, that I didn't need to worry about those things, and I believed it. For 30 years, I believed he was protecting me when actually he was imprisoning me. Without my own money, without financial knowledge, I was completely dependent on him. And he knew it. Oh, how he knew it. Isabel shared her own story on a rainy night by the fireplace. Her ex-husband, Richard Collins, had been charming and intelligent, but he was also a born manipulator. He ruined her relationship with her daughter, Claire, creating lies, distorting conversations, making mother and daughter drift apart for years. "It took me years to rebuild my relationship with my daughter," Isabel said, with tears in her eyes that couldn't see, but that felt everything. "And even now, there are scars that'll never completely disappear." I held her hand, feeling the weight of that emotional story. And I realized that abuse doesn't just destroy the victim. It destroys all the relationships around them, leaving a trail of pain and confusion. The nightmares continued. Every night was the same thing. I was in a dark room, trying to find the door, but the walls were moving. I'd hear Michael's voice echoing, "You'll never make it. You need me. You're weak." I'd wake up sweaty, trembling, with my heart racing. Isabel always appeared with chamomile tea and gentle words. "The nightmares are part of the process," she explained. "Your brain is processing the trauma, Eleanor. It's expelling the poison." I wanted to believe it, but there were nights when the fear was so intense that I thought about going back. I thought maybe it'd be easier to live in the known prison than face the unknown freedom. But then I'd look at Isabel, at her quiet strength, and something inside me refused to give up. Isabel became my moral and emotional compass. She didn't tell me what to do. She helped me discover what I wanted to do. In our midnight conversations, she asked me questions nobody had ever asked. "Eleanor, when was the last time you did something just because you wanted to?" I didn't know how to answer. "When was the last time you truly laughed?" I didn't know that either. "Who are you, Eleanor Harris, when nobody's watching?" That question destroyed me, because the truth is, I didn't know who I was anymore. I'd spent so much time being Michael's wife, following his rules, living under his shadows, that I'd completely lost myself. And now, at 50-something years old, I needed to rediscover myself from scratch. And that was terrifying. Gavin Miller, the mansion's caretaker and administrator, was another pillar in that refuge. He was young, maybe in his early 30s, with a gentle but firm manner. He cared for Isabel with an affection that reminded me of what true love should be: respectful, patient, without demands. He also started taking care of me in a way. He'd bring books he thought I'd like, prepare my favorite dishes, always ask if I was okay. It wasn't romantic interest. Gavin was gay and had an adorable boyfriend. It was simply pure humanity. And I wasn't used to that. I was used to conditional love, to kindnesses that came with demands. With Gavin, everything was light, genuine. And that made me realize how heavy my life with Michael had been. One afternoon, while we were organizing the library, Gavin told me something that stuck. "You know, Eleanor, Isabel always says the Crawford mansion has a soul, that it shelters whoever needs healing." He smiled, adjusting a pile of old books. "And I believe it. This house has seen many strong women pass through here. Isabel's grandmother, Lenora, was one of them. Her mother, Margaret, too. And now you." I felt a lump in my throat. Was I strong? I didn't feel strong. I felt broken, scared, lost. But maybe strength wasn't about not being afraid. Maybe it was about continuing, even with fear. Gavin gently squeezed my shoulder and went back to work, leaving me alone with my thoughts and with the growing feeling that I was exactly where I needed to be. That night, before sleeping, I stood looking out my bedroom window. The city of Seattle sparkled in the distance, full of lives being lived, of stories being written. I wondered how many other women were out there, trapped in marriages like mine, believing there was no way out. How many elderly mothers were advising their daughters to endure, to be strong, without realizing they were perpetuating cycles of pain? Isabel had shown me that abuse is systemic, that it crosses generations, that it disguises itself as love. And for the first time, I started to feel not only pain for my situation, but anger. Anger for having lost so much time. Anger for having been deceived. Anger for all the women who, just like me, believed the lies. And this anger, I'd discover soon, would be the fuel I needed to finally act. The day came when I needed to face Michael. I didn't want to, but it was necessary. There were documents I needed to get from the house in Bellevue. Our house, although it never really felt like mine. Isabel insisted that Gavin accompany me, and I accepted without hesitation. The idea of being alone with Michael terrified me. During the entire car ride, my hands were shaking. Gavin tried to distract me by talking about everyday things, but my mind was there, in that house I'd called home for decades. Would Michael be there? Would he try to convince me to come back? Or worse, would he explode in anger? I didn't know what to expect, and that left my stomach churning. But I knew I needed to do this. I needed to start recovering what was rightfully mine. The house was exactly as I'd left it. The well-maintained garden, the impeccable white curtains, everything in place. From the outside, it looked like the perfect setting of a happy marriage. But I knew the truth hiding behind those walls. Gavin parked and looked at me. "Are you sure you want to do this today?" I took a deep breath and nodded. It had to be now, before courage abandoned me. We went in together, and the familiar smell of the house hit me like a punch. It was a mixture of coffee, polished wood, and that expensive cologne Michael wore. For a second, I almost felt at home. Almost. But then I remembered the rain, the total humiliation of that night in the parking lot, and nostalgia gave way to determination. I didn't belong in that place anymore. Michael was in the living room, sitting in the leather armchair that was always his. When he saw me, his face went through several expressions: surprise, relief, anger, and finally, that calculated smile I knew so well. "Eleanor, you came back," he said, standing up as if he were receiving an expected visit. His voice was calm, controlled, but I could feel the tension underneath. "I knew you'd come back. You always come back." His words were like ice running down my spine. He didn't even ask where I'd been, if I was okay. Nothing. He just assumed I'd come back because, in his head, I had nowhere else to go. Gavin stayed by my side, silent but present, and that gave me strength. "I didn't come back, Michael," I said, surprised at the firmness of my own voice. "I came to get documents." His smile disappeared instantly. "Documents?" He crossed his arms, adopting that defensive posture I knew well. "What documents?" I took a deep breath. "Our financial documents, contracts, investments, bank accounts. Everything you always said you took care of for me." I saw his jaw tighten. That had hurt his pride, and I knew it. Michael didn't like being questioned, much less being challenged. "Eleanor, you're being ridiculous. You don't understand anything about finances. You're gonna mess up." And there it was, the pattern Isabel had warned me about. Disqualify, diminish, make me doubt myself. But this time, something was different. This time, I wasn't alone. "Then explain it to me," I said. "Since I'm so dumb, explain to me where the money is." The atmosphere in the room changed completely. Michael took a step toward me, and Gavin immediately moved, standing between us. "I think you'd better keep your distance," Gavin said, in a low but firm voice. Michael looked at him with contempt. "And who are you? My wife's new boyfriend?" I felt anger rising in my throat. "He's a friend, Michael. Something you never were to me." The words came out before I could filter them, and I felt a strange pleasure seeing his expression change. Michael wasn't used to being confronted, much less by me. He'd always had total control, always been the owner of the narrative. But now, for the first time in decades, I was rewriting the story, and he was hating every second of it. I went to the office where Michael kept important documents. The drawer was locked, of course. "Where's the key, Michael?" He didn't answer, just stood there, with that expression of someone calculating the next move. Gavin, always practical, took a paperclip and unlocked the drawer in seconds. Michael exploded. "That's breaking and entering! You have no right!" But I was already opening the folders, leafing through contracts, seeing numbers I'd never seen before. And what I found made me freeze. Hidden investments in his name. Offshore accounts I didn't know existed. A second mortgage on the house he never mentioned. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just emotional control. It was financial fraud. He'd hidden a fortune from me while making me feel like I was a burden, like I should be grateful for having a roof over my head. "You lied," I said, my voice trembling not from fear, but from pure anger. "You lied about everything. All this time, you made me believe we didn't have that much money, that I needed to save, that I was an expense. And all along you had millions hidden." Michael tried to approach, but Gavin blocked him again. "Eleanor, you don't understand. I did this to protect you, to protect us. Things are complicated." "Protect?" That word sounded so absurd I almost laughed. "You didn't protect me, Michael. You imprisoned me. You kept me financially hostage so I could never leave." I started gathering the papers, my mind working fast. Isabel had given me a lawyer's name. It was time to use it. "I'm taking these documents, and you're going to hear me one last time. We're done." Michael went white. This wasn't going how he planned. He expected me to come back remorseful, begging forgiveness, promising to be a good wife. But I wasn't that woman anymore. "You won't survive without me," he said, and there was desperation in his voice now. "Eleanor, you don't have a job. You don't have money. You don't have anything. You're going to end up living with that gold-digger old woman who took you in, being treated like an ungrateful daughter who abandoned her husband. Is that what you want?" Each word was an attempt to break me, to make me back down, and I won't lie, part of me got scared. Was he right? Was I too weak to survive alone? But then I looked at Gavin, who was giving me an encouraging smile, and I remembered Isabel saying, "You're stronger than you think," and something inside me solidified. "I'll survive, Michael. And not only that, I'll thrive." I grabbed the last folder and turned to leave, but Michael wasn't going to give up easily. He grabbed my arm hard, pulling me back. "You're not going anywhere until we settle this." The pain in my arm was instant, but before I could react, Gavin was there. He pushed Michael away firmly, placing himself between us again. "Touch her again, and I'm calling the police," Gavin said, his voice low but full of authority. Michael backed away, more from surprise than fear, but I saw something in his eyes that scared me. It wasn't regret, it was calculation. He was planning the next move, thinking about how to regain control, and in that moment, I realized that confronting him wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a much bigger battle. We left the house quickly, the documents pressed against my chest like stolen treasures. In the car, Gavin looked at me. "Are you okay?" I wanted to say yes, but the truth is I was shaking from head to toe. "I don't know," I answered honestly. But I did it. I actually confronted him. Gavin smiled. "And it was amazing. You were amazing." As we drove back to the mansion, I looked out the window and saw Seattle pass by in blurs of light. Something had changed in me in that office. A crack had appeared in the power Michael had over me. It was small, still fragile, but it was there. And for the first time, I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, I could actually break free. The question now was, what would Michael do when he realized he was losing control? And more importantly, was I prepared to face the storm that was coming? Back at the mansion, I poured all the documents onto the library table. Isabel was sitting in her favorite armchair with that elegant posture that never left her, even without being able to see. "Tell me everything," she said, and her voice carried a mixture of curiosity and concern. As I recounted every detail of the confrontation, she listened in silence, only nodding from time to time. When I finished, she sighed deeply. "Eleanor, you took the most important first step. You looked truth in the eyes and didn't look away. Now comes the hard part, building your freedom." She handed me the card of a lawyer, Marcus Chen, specialized in matrimonial law. He's discreet, brilliant, and not afraid of men like Michael. I held the card with both hands, feeling the weight of that small piece of paper. It was more than a contact. It was a door to a future I could barely imagine. That night, I went back to Lenora Crawford's diaries. There was something in those yellowed pages that calmed and disturbed me at the same time. Lenora wrote with brutal honesty about her marriage to Thomas Crawford, a wealthy and respected man in Seattle in the early 20th century. On the outside, they were the perfect couple. On the inside, she lived a silent nightmare. "Today he told me I'm too stupid to understand business," Lenora wrote in an entry from 1923. "He said I'm lucky to have a man who takes care of everything for me. But when I ask to see the accounts, he laughs and says, 'Women don't have the mind for these things.'" I closed my eyes, feeling tears stream down. It was identical. Word for word, it was what Michael told me. 100 years later, and men still used the same tactics. Lenora's emotional story was my story, and it was probably the story of millions of women. But Lenora also wrote about resistance, small rebellions that seemed insignificant but planted seeds of courage. "Today I saved $5 I found on the street," she wrote. "He doesn't know. It's my secret, my little freedom." I smiled through tears. That was genius. Lenora was building her escape, penny by penny, thought by thought. She knew she couldn't confront Thomas directly. Society at that time wouldn't allow it. But she could resist in silence, gather strength, wait for the right moment. And when that moment came, decades later, she managed to leave a legacy of strength for her daughters and granddaughters, including Isabel. "You see, Eleanor," Isabel said, as if she could sense my thoughts. "Courage isn't always a scream. Sometimes it's a whisper that refuses to die." The next day, I went to Marcus Chen's office. It was a discreet place in downtown Seattle, with glass walls overlooking the city. Marcus was an Asian American man in his 40s, with a direct but kind manner. He flipped through the documents I brought, and with each page his expression became more serious. "Mrs. Harris," he finally said, taking off his glasses, "your husband committed several financial irregularities, undeclared offshore accounts, hidden investments, a second mortgage you didn't sign. This isn't just controlling behavior. It's a crime." My heart raced. Crime. That word sounded heavy in the air. "So I have a case?" Marcus smiled for the first time. "Ma'am, you don't have a case. You have a gold mine." Literally. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like hope shining in my chest. Maybe I wasn't as powerless as Michael always made me believe. Marcus explained everything about matrimonial rights in the state of Washington. It was a community property state, which meant that everything acquired during the marriage belonged to both equally. Michael couldn't simply hide money and leave me with nothing. "And there's more," Marcus continued. "Given that he deliberately hid assets and tried to defraud the property division process, you can ask for additional compensation for bad faith." I could barely believe what I was hearing. For years, Michael made me feel like I was a burden, like I should be grateful for having a roof and food. But the truth was that half of everything was legally mine, always was. "He's going to try to scare you," Marcus warned. "He'll threaten, make promises, try to negotiate. Don't accept anything without consulting me first. Men like him only understand when they lose at their own game." That afternoon, sitting on the mansion's porch with a cup of tea, I reflected on everything I'd learned. Isabel was beside me in silence, just enjoying the fresh air. "You know, Isabel," I said, "my elderly mother always taught me that a good wife endured everything in silence. That marriage was about sacrifice, about putting your husband first." Isabel turned her face in my direction, her blind eyes, but somehow penetrating. "Your mother was wrong, dear. Marriage should be partnership, not martyrdom. And sacrifice only makes sense when it's mutual, not when it's just you bleeding while he prospers." Those words hit me deep. My mother wasn't bad. She'd just learned the same patterns her mother taught, that her mother taught. Cycles of submission passed from generation to generation, as if they were valuable inheritances. But I was about to break that cycle. For me, and for all the women in my lineage. Days later, I received a package via express mail. It was from Michael. My heart raced as I opened it. Inside were divorce papers and a letter. "Eleanor," the letter began, with that handwriting I knew so well. "Let's resolve this in a civilized way. I'm offering $50,000 and the summer house in Tacoma as a settlement. Sign and we'll avoid a legal battle that will only hurt you." $50,000. The summer house. It seemed like a lot, until I remembered that Marcus had estimated our total assets at over $5 million. Michael was offering me less than 1% of what was rightfully mine, and he still had the audacity to call that civilized. I took everything to Marcus, who laughed bitterly. "This is typical. He's testing to see if you're still manipulable. And Eleanor? This proposal is insulting. Don't sign anything." I decided it was time to give my first official response. With Marcus's guidance, I wrote a refusal letter. It wasn't long. It wasn't emotional. It just said, "I don't accept the proposed terms. I expect to receive a fair proposal based on all matrimonial assets, including those concealed." It was Marcus who sent it, on his office letterhead. It was short, professional, powerful. And for the first time in my life, I had said no to Michael clearly and definitively, without explanations, without excuses, without fear. Just no. That small and simple word carried decades of broken silence. Isabel, when I told her, squeezed my hand tightly. That's it, Eleanor. That's the sound of your voice. Never let it be silenced again. And in that moment, I promised myself I wouldn't. Even if I had to scream alone in the dark, my voice would never be silenced again. At night, I reread Lenora's diaries again. There was a passage that marked me deeply. The chains that bind us aren't made of iron. They're made of words repeated until we believe them. You're weak, you need me, you can't do it alone. But today I realized something. If the chains are made of words, I can break them with other words. Words like, I am strong, I am capable, I deserve more. Tears streamed down my face as I absorbed that wisdom. Lenora never managed to completely free herself. Her time didn't allow it. But she left tools so other women could. Her diaries were maps, guides for survivors. And I was following those maps, step by step, word by word. The total humiliation I experienced that night in the parking lot was transforming into fuel, and I was just starting to burn. Gavin came into the library bringing fresh tea and cookies. You're different, he observed with that gentle smile. More present. It's like you're waking up. I thought about that. He was right. I was waking up from 30 years of sleepwalking. Each day at the Crawford mansion, each conversation with Isabel, each page of Lenora's diaries, each meeting with Marcus, everything was part of my awakening. I was learning to be Eleanor Harris again. Not Michael's wife, not the invisible woman, just Eleanor. And with each day she became stronger, clearer, more real. You know, Gavin, I said, for the first time in my life, I'm starting to like the woman I see in the mirror. He smiled broadly. Then my work here is paying off. But the truth is, it wasn't just his work. It was a combination of forces, of stories, of women who came before me and who now guided me. And I was ready for the next phase of this journey, even without knowing exactly what awaited me. Michael's response came 3 days later, but not in the form of a letter. They were messages, dozens of them. My phone wouldn't stop vibrating, one after another, as if he was having a breakdown in real time. The first ones were furious. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, Eleanor. You're being manipulated by that old woman and that gold-digger lawyer. They just want our money. Then came the veiled threats. You're gonna regret this. I'll make sure you don't see a penny. I'll prove you're unstable. Isabel, hearing the messages, just sighed. It's the fury phase. He realized you're not coming back, so now he wants to destroy you. My hand trembled holding the phone. Even knowing he was manipulating, his words still had power over me. It was as if 30 years of conditioning couldn't be erased in a few weeks. But I wasn't going to respond. Marcus had been clear. Silence was my best weapon now. The messages kept changing tone. After anger came self-pity. Eleanor, are you really going to throw away 3 decades of marriage? After everything we built together? After everything I did for you? I almost laughed bitterly. Everything he did for me? He isolated me, controlled me, hid money, made me feel small for years. But in his head, he was the hero of the story. He had saved me from a mediocre life, given me a beautiful house, protected me from the cruel world. That was his narrative, and he believed it wholeheartedly. Gavin, who was with me when I read these messages, shook his head. He really thinks he's the victim, doesn't he? And it was true. In Michael's distorted mind, I was the ungrateful daughter, the cruel wife who abandoned him for no reason. He had rewritten our entire story, erasing every abuse, every humiliation, every lie. Then came the pleas. Eleanor, please, let's talk, just the two of us. We can work this out. I love you. I've always loved you. You're the only woman I've ever truly loved. That was like a stab, because part of me still wanted to believe. Part of me was still that young woman in her 20s who fell in love with Michael's charm and attention. But Isabel had warned me about this. Their love isn't love, Eleanor. It's possession. When they say I love you, what they really mean is I own you. I looked at his messages again and tried to see beyond the words. And then I saw there wasn't a single question about how I was doing. There was no genuine concern for my well-being. It was all about him, about what he was feeling, about what he was losing. Even in his pleas, Michael only thought about himself. Marcus called me that afternoon. Eleanor, your husband contacted the office. He's offering couples therapy, promising changes, saying he'll do anything. I sighed. And what did you say? Marcus chuckled. I said my client is only interested in proceeding with the divorce under appropriate legal terms. He didn't like it. There was a pause. Eleanor, he's gonna escalate. Men like Michael go through predictable phases: denial, anger, bargaining, and when nothing works, they move to destruction. You need to be prepared. My stomach churned. Destruction. That word echoed in my head for the rest of the day. What exactly was Michael capable of doing? I thought I knew him, but now I realized I'd lived with a stranger for 30 years, and strangers were unpredictable. Flowers started arriving. First, a dozen red roses, then 2 huge arrangements, then baskets of expensive gifts. Each delivery came with a card. Sorry, my love. Please come home. I miss you. Nothing makes sense without you. Gavin put everything in the basement without even showing me. But I saw the deliveries arriving. It was disturbing. Michael was trying to buy my forgiveness, as if decades of abuse could be erased with flowers and chocolates. Isabel commented during dinner. My ex-husband did the same thing. When he realized he was losing control, he tried to win me back. Gifts, expensive dinners, empty promises. And when nothing worked, he showed who he really was. I looked at her, seeing the invisible scars that woman carried. How did you survive? I asked. She smiled sadly. One day at a time, dear, and never alone. Michael started using other people as messengers. His brother Chris called me, embarrassed. Ellie, Michael he's not doing well. He showed up here yesterday at dawn, crying. I've never seen him like this. Chris paused. Look, I know you guys are having problems, but can't you try to work it out? He said he's willing to change. I felt anger rise in my throat. Chris, he had 30 years to change, 30 years of opportunities, and only now, when he's losing control, he decides to care? There was silence on the other end. Chris was a good man, but he didn't understand. Nobody who hasn't lived through abuse can fully understand. Did he tell you about the offshore accounts, Chris? About the millions he hid from me? About the night he left me in the rain? More silence. Of course not. Michael had only shown his version of the story, the one where he was the victim of an ungrateful wife. Mutual friends started avoiding me. Some blocked my number. Others sent subtle messages trying to mediate the situation. A former colleague wrote, Eleanor, every marriage has problems. You're both adults. I'm sure you can work it out. That deeply irritated me. As if abuse were just a normal marriage problem. As if years of manipulation could be resolved with a conversation and goodwill. Isabel reminded me that this was also part of the pattern. Abusers are charming publicly. They build a support network that will always doubt the victim, because in his narrative, he's the good husband being wronged. And that was exactly it. Michael had spent decades building an impeccable public image while destroying me in private. And now, when I finally spoke up, nobody believed me. Because how could that kind, successful, and respected man be an abuser? It was easier to believe I was crazy, dramatic, or simply a difficult wife. Then Michael tried the lowest emotional blackmail. He sent a message saying he was thinking about giving up on everything, that he saw no point in continuing to live without me. It was a veiled suicide threat designed to make me feel guilty and come running back. Marcus, when I told him, was furious. This is classic manipulation, Eleanor. He's trying to make you feel responsible for his life. Don't fall for it. But it was hard not to fall for it. Even knowing it was manipulation, there was still that voice inside me saying, what if he really does something? Can you live with that? Isabel held my hands that night. Eleanor, you're not responsible for his choices. You never were. He's an adult, and if he chooses to hurt himself, it's not your fault. You can't set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm. Those words stayed with me. I couldn't sacrifice myself to save Michael from himself, especially because he wasn't really in danger. He was just trying to control me in a new way. When nothing else worked, Michael finally showed his true face. The messages completely changed tone. You've always been weak, Eleanor. You've always needed me for everything. Without me, you're nothing. You're gonna end up alone, poor and regretful. And when you come crawling back, I won't be waiting. The insults were cruel, calculated to hurt where he knew it hurt. He called me dead weight, a parasite, a worthless woman. He said I was lucky he put up with all those years, that any other man would have left me long ago. Each word was poison, and he knew exactly where to inject it. But this time, something was different. This time, I read those words and felt pity. Not for me, for him. Because there was a man so insecure, so fragile, that the only way to feel powerful was by destroying the woman he once promised to love. And I didn't want anything more to do with that kind of love. Marcus called me with important news. Michael hired one of Seattle's most aggressive lawyers. He's going to try to drag you into a long and expensive legal battle, hoping you'll give up. I took a deep breath. And what do? Marcus laughed. We fight, and we win. Because unlike him, we have the truth on our side. That night, Isabel found me in the library, flipping through Lenora's diaries. You're scared, she said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. Yes, I admitted, but I'm also determined. Michael thinks he can break me like he always did. But he doesn't understand that I'm not that woman anymore. I've changed. Isabel smiled, proud. Yes, you have. And now, Eleanor, comes the most dangerous part of this emotional story. Because a man losing control is unpredictable. And unpredictable can be very, very dangerous. A chill ran down my spine. I knew she was right. Michael had gone through all the phases. Fury, pleas, blackmail, insults. And none worked. What does a desperate man accustomed to having total control do when he loses everything? I was about to find out. It was on a sunny morning that Isabel introduced me to Sophie Martinez. She arrived at the mansion timidly, with swollen eyes and nervous hands that wouldn't stop fidgeting with her purse strap. Sophie was around 30 years old, pretty in a delicate way, but carried that invisible weight I knew so well, the weight of someone who lives walking on eggshells. Isabel brought her to the library, where Gavin and I were organizing books. Eleanor, this is Sophie. I thought you should talk. Isabel said this and left, leaving us alone on purpose. Sophie sat on the edge of the armchair as if she didn't deserve to occupy the whole space. And there, in that simple gesture, I saw myself. I saw the woman I was a few weeks ago, small, scared, apologizing for existing. My heart tightened. Want some tea? I offered, trying to make her feel comfortable. She nodded shyly, and we started talking. Sophie started slowly, with broken sentences and eyes always down. My boyfriend, he's not bad. He just gets stressed from work. Ah, that phrase. How many times had I said the same thing about Michael? He gets stressed. He had a difficult childhood. He didn't mean that. I provoked it. Always an excuse, always a justification. Tell me more, I asked gently, without judging. And then Sophie broke down. She told me about Tyler, her boyfriend of 5 years, how he controlled her clothes, her friendships, her phone, how he exploded over anything, cold food, messy house, a wrong look, how afterwards he'd apologize crying, promising it would never happen again, and how it always happened again. But I love him, Sophie said, with tears streaming. And he says he loves me, that he only acts like this because he cares too much, you know? I held her hand, feeling that familiar pain. She was exactly where I'd been, trapped in a web of love that was actually disguised control. Sophie, I began, choosing words carefully. When you're with him, do you feel free or afraid? She paused, thinking. I'm always alert, you know? Trying not to do anything that irritates him. Trying to be perfect. My heart shattered. That was exactly it. That constant hypervigilance, that permanent fear of doing something wrong. And does he have access to your money? I asked. Sophie nodded. He said it's better if he manages it because I spend too much, but I don't even buy anything for myself. Just the basics. There it was again. Financial control. The same tactic Michael used on me for decades. Sophie was me, 25 years younger, and hearing her story was like watching a movie where you already know the tragic ending, but can't do anything to stop it. Or could I? As Sophie told her emotional story, full of painful details and familiar patterns, something changed inside me. I was no longer just the victim processing her own trauma. I was becoming a witness, counselor, guide, and that gave me a completely new perspective. When you're inside the abuse, it's hard to see. It's like being in a dark room. Your eyes get used to it, and you start thinking that's normal. But when you leave and see another person in that same dark room, you realize how absurd it is. Sophie, this isn't love, I said, and my voice was firm. Love doesn't make you walk on eggshells. Love doesn't control you. Love doesn't diminish you. She looked at me with wide eyes, as if I'd said something revolutionary. And maybe it was, for her, just as it was for me when Isabel first told me. Sophie told me that Tyler isolated her from family. He said her elderly mother was toxic, that her siblings were jealous, that her friends were bad influences. And Sophie, wanting to be a good girlfriend, distanced herself from everyone. Now she was alone, with Tyler being her only significant human connection. And you know what's worse? Sophie said, sobbing. I feel like an ungrateful daughter. My mom tried to warn me about him in the beginning, and I fought with her. Said horrible things, and now it's been months since we've talked. I understood that guilt. I'd done the same thing, pushed away people who tried to help me, defended Michael when I shouldn't have, chose the abuser over people who genuinely cared. It's not too late, I told Sophie. Mothers forgive, and people who truly love you will welcome you with open arms when you're ready. I wanted to believe that for her, and maybe also for myself. Isabel joined us at lunchtime, bringing a tray of sandwiches Gavin had prepared. Sophie was visibly more relaxed now, as if talking about everything had lifted a weight off her shoulders. Sophie, Isabel began, with that quiet wisdom only she had. You don't need to decide anything today, but you need to know you deserve more. You deserve to be loved without fear. You deserve to have your own voice, your own money, your own life. Sophie looked at Isabel with a mixture of admiration and desperation. But how? I don't have anywhere to go. I don't have money. He's gonna be furious if I try to leave. And there it was, the same barriers I faced, the same excuses that keep us trapped. Isabel smiled gently. There's always a way, dear. Always. And you're not alone. She pointed to me. Eleanor also thought she had no way out, and look where she is now. Sophie looked at me with curiosity, and I told my story. Not all the details, but enough for her to understand. I talked about Michael, about the 30 years of manipulation, about the night in the rain that changed everything. I talked about Isabel rescuing me, about Lenora's diaries, about the confrontation at the Bellevue house. And as I spoke, I saw Sophie recognizing herself in every word. When I finished, she was crying. You did it, she whispered. You actually got out. And then I realized something fundamental. Telling my story wasn't just about processing my trauma. It was about lighting the path for other women. Each scar I showed, each lesson I shared, could save someone. Sophie wasn't just a woman needing help. She was my mirror. She showed me who I was, and by helping her, I healed myself too. Gavin came in with more tea and cookies, and the atmosphere became lighter. Sophie started asking practical questions. How do I get my own money without him finding out? How do I leave without him finding me? What if he hurts me? They were questions I'd asked too, and that now I could answer based on my experience. First, you need a plan, I explained. It can't be impulsive. You save money little by little, somewhere he doesn't know about. You document everything, messages, photos of bruises if there are any, everything that can serve as evidence. And when you're ready, you leave when he's not home and go straight to a safe place. Sophie absorbed each word like it was oxygen, and Isabel added, and you never, never warn him you're leaving, because the most dangerous moment is when the abuser realizes he's losing control. A heavy silence filled the room, because we all knew that was true. The total humiliation of being trapped was painful, but the escape attempt could be fatal. Sophie spent the whole afternoon with us. We talked about healthy relationships, about red flags, about the difference between love and obsession. Isabel shared resources, shelter numbers, specialized lawyers, support groups. Gavin offered practical help, saying he could help Sophie move when she was ready. And me? I found myself transformed. I was no longer just Eleanor Harris, the victim who escaped. I was becoming Eleanor Harris, the survivor who helps others survive. And that gave a completely new meaning to my pain. All those years of suffering weren't in vain. They prepared me for this moment, to be able to look into another woman's eyes and say, I understand. I've been there, and you're gonna make it too. That was power. That was purpose. When Sophie left, already getting dark, she hugged me tight. Thank you, she whispered. You gave me hope. I held back tears until she left. Then I broke down in Isabel's arms. She's so young, I sobbed. She has her whole life ahead of her. How could Tyler do this to her? Isabel stroked my hair. Because men like Tyler and Michael don't see women as people. They see them as property, as things to be controlled. We stayed there in silence for a while, processing everything. And then Isabel said something that changed everything. "Eleanor, maybe your story doesn't end with just you getting free. Maybe it's about freeing others too. Maybe you're destined to break cycles other women couldn't." Her words echoed inside me. Was it possible? Was it possible to transform all this pain into something bigger? I looked out the mansion window, seeing Seattle's lights twinkling in the distance, and wondered how many other Sophies existed out there, how many other Eleanors, and if there was something I could do for them. But before saving anyone else, I needed to ensure my own safety, because something told me the storm with Michael hadn't passed yet. In fact, it was just beginning. Everything was too quiet. It had been a week since Michael sent messages, called, showed up. Marcus thought it was strange. "Men like him don't give up like that," he said on the phone with clear concern in his voice. "Stay alert, Eleanor." But I wanted to believe that maybe he'd finally accepted. Maybe he'd moved on. Isabel, however, wasn't convinced. "His silence isn't peace, Eleanor. It's planning." She said this with a certainty that gave me chills. As always, Isabel was right. That's when Chris, Michael's brother, called me completely terrified. His voice trembled so much I could barely understand. "Ellie, Michael showed up here yesterday at dawn, banging on the door, yelling. He wasn't well. He was asking where you were, saying he needed to find you." My blood ran cold. "What did you tell him?" Chris sighed. "That I didn't know. But Ellie, he stood outside my house for hours. My wife was terrified. We called the police, but by the time they arrived, he was already gone." In the following days, I discovered Michael wasn't just looking for me. He was asking everyone. He called old friends of mine I hadn't seen in years, showed up at the beauty salon I used to go to, even went to my elderly mother's house. My mother called me confused and scared. "Eleanor, what's happening?" "Michael showed up here saying you're sick, that you need help, that someone's manipulating you." My mother, always protective even without fully understanding, told him she didn't know where I was, but I could hear in her voice she was worried. Not about Michael, but about me. "Mom, I'm fine," I reassured her. "I'm safe, but don't tell anyone where I am, please." There was a long pause. "Daughter, what did he do to you?" For the first time, my mother was asking the right question, and I promised I'd tell her everything, but not now. Now I needed to protect myself. Marcus immediately took legal action. He filed for a restraining order, a protective order prohibiting Michael from approaching me. With the history of obsessive behavior and reports from people he contacted, the judge should approve it, Marcus explained. But until the document was processed, I was vulnerable. Gavin increased the mansion's security. New locks on doors, cameras installed, stronger exterior lights. "It's just a precaution," he said. But I saw the concern in his eyes. Isabel stayed calm, but was also more attentive. At night, I'd hear her walking through the house, checking doors and windows. Fear had settled into the Crawford mansion, an invisible but very present intruder. And for the first time since arriving there, I didn't feel completely safe. Michael had invaded our refuge without even stepping inside it, just with his threatening presence from a distance. Then it happened. It was on a stormy night, the kind of torrential rain Seattle knows well. Lightning cut through the sky, thunder made the windows shake. I was in bed, trying to read to calm my mind, when I heard something. A low sound, like something scraping against the mansion's wall. At first I thought it was the wind, but then I heard it again, clearer, more intentional. My heart raced. I got up slowly, approaching the window cautiously, and then I saw him, Michael. He was standing in the middle of the garden, completely drenched, with clothes stuck to his body and hair plastered to his forehead. But the worst part was his expression. He stared fixedly at my window, like a statue, like a shadow that gained human form. His eyes shone with something I'd never seen before. It wasn't anger, it was pure obsession. A scream got stuck in my throat. I ran to the hallway and screamed for Gavin. He arrived in seconds, still in pajamas, and looked out the window. "Shit," he muttered, grabbing his phone. "Stay here, Eleanor. Don't leave the room." But I couldn't stop looking. Michael remained there, standing, staring at me. The rain fell so hard it was almost like a curtain between us. But I could see every detail. The way his fists were clenched, how his chest rose and fell rapidly, how he tilted his head in a strange, almost robotic way. Gavin ran downstairs, turning on all the exterior lights. When light flooded the garden, Michael finally moved, but he didn't leave. He started walking toward the house, slowly, like a predator approaching prey. Gavin opened the front door and yelled, "You're trespassing! The police have been called! Leave now!" Michael stopped, looked at Gavin, and then smiled. It was the most terrifying smile I'd ever seen. Empty, disconnected from reality. For an endless moment, I thought Michael was going to attack Gavin. He took another step and another, approaching the main door. Gavin didn't back down, but I saw tension in every muscle of his body. "Michael, don't do this," Gavin said, firmer now. And then, as if a spell had been broken, Michael stopped. He turned his back and started walking back to the garden. But before disappearing into the darkness, he shouted something that froze me to the bone. "You can't hide forever, Eleanor. You're mine. You'll always be mine." His voice echoed through the rainy night, loaded with a sick possessiveness that made me want to throw up. When he finally disappeared beyond the wall, my knees failed and I collapsed on the hallway floor. Isabel found me there, trembling uncontrollably. She didn't say anything, just hugged me while I sobbed. The total humiliation I experienced before seemed like child's play compared to the terror I felt that night. The police arrived 15 minutes later, but Michael had already disappeared. They found deep footprints in the garden mud, marks on the wall as if he'd tried to climb it, and, most disturbing, the side gate forced open. He hadn't just shown up there. He'd tried to get in. One of the officers, a woman in her 40s with kind eyes, sat with me. "Mrs. Harris, the restraining order request was approved today. That means any approach from him now is a crime. If he shows up again, we'll call immediately and he'll be arrested." That should have calmed me down, but it didn't, because a piece of paper doesn't stop an obsessed man. And Michael had crossed a dangerous line. He was no longer trying to win me back or punish me emotionally. He was hunting, and I was the prey. Marcus called the next morning, furious when he found out. "This changes everything, Eleanor. Stalking behavior, trespassing, threats. He's burying himself legally." But I didn't care about legal victories. I just wanted to feel safe again. Isabel reinforced security even more. She hired a night guard, installed alarms on windows, even adopted a large dog, a German shepherd named Atlas, who barked at any suspicious movement. I didn't go out alone anymore, not even to the garden. Sophie called, worried, after Gavin told her what happened. "Eleanor, are you okay? Do you need anything?" Her concern touched me deeply. She was dealing with her own battles, but still found space to care about me. "I'm okay, Sophie, just scared." There was a pause. "Tyler's doing the same thing," she confessed. "Showing up at places where I am, sending obsessive messages, saying he can't live without me." My heart tightened. They were different men, but the script was identical, as if there was a secret abuser's manual, all following the same 6 steps. "Sophie, you have to get out of there before it gets worse," I begged. And she, with a trembling voice, said, "I know, and I will, soon." I prayed she'd have courage before it was too late. In the following days, every noise made me jump. Every shadow in the garden seemed like Michael. I wasn't sleeping well, always waking up with nightmares where he found me, dragged me back to that house in Bellevue, locked me up, and threw away the key. Isabel noticed I was breaking psychologically. "Eleanor, you need to process this trauma. You can't just ignore it, or it'll consume you." She suggested therapy, and for the first time I agreed. Marcus referred me to a therapist specialized in domestic abuse victims, Dr. Rachel Morrison. In the first session, sitting in that cozy office smelling of lavender, I finally let everything out. I told her about the 30 years with Michael, about the night in the rain, about how he showed up in the garden like a ghost. "Doctor." Rachel listened to everything without interrupting, and when I finished, she said something that surprised me. "Eleanor, what you're going through is called post-traumatic terror. And it's real, it's valid, and it's not weakness. It's the natural response of someone who lived under constant threat." Those words gave me permission to feel fear without judging myself for it. But even with all the therapy, all the security, all the support network, there was a truth I couldn't ignore. Michael wasn't going to stop. The restraining order was just paper. The cameras were just technology. None of that would stop him if he really decided to act. And while he was out there, obsessed and unpredictable, I'd always be looking over my shoulder. Isabel found me in the library one afternoon, looking out the window with Atlas lying at my feet. "You're thinking about him," she said. It wasn't a question. "I'm thinking about what he's going to do next," I confessed. Because men like Michael don't give up. They escalate until they get what they want, or until they're forced to stop. Isabel sat beside me. Then let's force him to stop. Legally, socially, in every way possible. He wants to destroy you, Eleanor, but he doesn't know you've already risen from the ashes. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel that strength she saw in me. But in that moment, all I felt was exhaustion. Exhaustion from fighting, from being afraid, from always being on alert. But giving up wasn't an option, not after coming this far. So I took a deep breath, petted Atlas, and promised myself that no matter what Michael did, he wouldn't have me back. Not alive, not dead. I was free now. And freedom, I learned, is something worth fighting for, even when the fight seems impossible to win. I woke up on a November morning with a strange clarity. After weeks living with fear, something inside me changed. It wasn't that the fear had disappeared. It was still there, latent. But along with it, there was something new. Determination. Michael wanted to destroy me, make me disappear, erase me. And the best way to resist that was to do exactly the opposite. Exist with strength, with purpose, with voice. I went down to breakfast and found Isabel at the table, with that knowing smile she always had when she noticed changes in me. "Good morning, Eleanor. You look different today." I smiled back. "I feel different. I'm tired of hiding, of just reacting to what Michael does. I want to do something that matters." Isabel tilted her head, curious. "And what do you have in mind?" I took a deep breath. "I want to write. I want to tell my story. And I want to help other women like Sophie find their voices too." Isabel's eyes sparkled, and I knew she was proud. Isabel took me to the library and suggested something that seemed both scary and liberating. "Why don't we transform this space into something bigger? A place where women can gather, share stories, support each other." The idea hit me like lightning. Yes, that was exactly it. The Crawford Mansion, which had been my refuge, could become a refuge for others too. Gavin, when we told him, was enthusiastic. "I can help organize, prepare the library to receive groups, make tea, create a welcoming environment." And so Awakened Voices was born. It was more than a support group. It was a safe space where women who lived or had lived abuse could finally speak without fear of judgment, without fear of not being believed, without fear of being called crazy, dramatic, or, even worse, ungrateful daughters who abandoned their homes. It was a place where pain transformed into power and silence transformed into an emotional story. Sophie was the first one I invited. When I told her about the group, she started crying. "You do that? For me? For other women like us?" I held her hands. "It's not just for you, Sophie. It's for me too. I discovered that telling our story isn't weakness. It's the bravest act we can do." Sophie agreed to participate but was nervous. "What if I don't know what to say? What if I break down?" Isabel, who was with us, responded with her quiet wisdom. "Then you break down, and we catch you. That's what we're here for." We scheduled the first meeting for the following Friday. Isabel suggested we start small, just the three of us, Sophie, and maybe one or two more women Isabel knew through the local church. "Slow growth is sustainable growth," she said. And I agreed. It wasn't about quantity. It was about quality, about genuine connection, about creating a truly safe space. The first Awakened Voices meeting happened on a cold, clear night. The library was cozy, with fireplace lit, scattered pillows, hot tea, and cookies prepared by Gavin. Besides me, Isabel and Sophie, two more women came. Maria, a Mexican immigrant who had fled an abusive marriage a year ago, and Jennifer, a teacher in her 40s who was married to a narcissist for 2 decades. When everyone sat down, there was a heavy silence, not uncomfortable, but loaded with expectation. I started by talking a little about myself, about Michael, about how I'd gotten there. And as I spoke, I saw recognition in their eyes. Maria started crying silently. Jennifer nodded several times. Sophie held her hands tightly, as if holding herself back from breaking down. When I finished, I said, "This is a safe space. What's said here stays here. And there's no judgment, only support." And then, one by one, they started talking. Maria told about her ex-husband, Carlos, who beat and humiliated her daily. She'd fled in the middle of the night with her 2 small daughters, leaving everything behind. "I had no money, didn't speak English well, didn't know anyone," she said, with a heavy accent but firm voice. But I preferred to sleep in the car with my daughters than spend one more night with him. Her courage left me speechless. Jennifer shared a different story. There was no physical violence, but constant psychological violence. Her husband, Brian, criticized her all the time. Her appearance, her intelligence, her way of raising the children. He never hit me, Jennifer said, so it took me years to realize it was abuse. I thought the problem was me being too sensitive. Isabel gently interrupted. Emotional abuse is as destructive as physical. It just leaves scars nobody sees. Jennifer cried, relieved to finally be validated. And Sophie? Sophie was still with Tyler, but was planning her exit. Hearing the others' stories gave her courage. I'm gonna leave, she said, with more conviction than I'd heard before. I don't know when, but I will. Isabel suggested we do a writing exercise. Write a letter to your younger selves, to the girl you were before the abuse started. Tell her what you need her to know. We distributed paper and pens, and for 20 minutes, the library was silent, just the sound of pens scratching paper and occasional sniffles. When we finished, Isabel asked if anyone wanted to share. Maria was first. Her letter was short but powerful. Dear Maria, you're gonna survive. You're gonna be strong. Your daughters will call you a hero one day. Don't give up. We all clapped, with tears in our eyes. Jennifer read hers too. Jenny, you're not dumb. You're not ugly. You're not a bad mother. Those are lies he planted in you. The truth is, you're amazing. And then it was my turn. I took a deep breath and read, Eleanor, the girl who dreamed of true love. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for not protecting you. But I want you to know, you survived. And now you're helping others survive too. Your pain wasn't in vain. When I finished, I looked around and saw everyone was crying. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of liberation. Sophie shared something during the meeting that marked me deeply. You know what's hardest? It's that he's not bad all the time. There are days when Tyler is amazing, affectionate, caring, funny. And on those days I think, see, he's not that bad, I'm exaggerating. And then I feel guilty for even thinking about leaving. Maria nodded vigorously. Carlos was the same. After hitting me, he'd cry and apologize. He'd say he loved me, that it would never happen again, and I'd believe it, every time. Isabel explained this was part of the abuse cycle. Tension, explosion, honeymoon, repeat. The good moments aren't accidental. They're calculated. They serve to keep you confused, hopeful, trapped. Hearing this out loud, validated by other women who lived the same thing, was like turning on a light in a dark room. We weren't crazy. We weren't exaggerating. We were responding rationally to irrational situations created by manipulative men. And recognizing this together was revolutionary. When the meeting ended, nobody wanted to leave. We stayed talking informally for another hour, sharing phone numbers, creating a WhatsApp group, promising to support each other between meetings. Maria hugged Sophie and said, You're gonna get out, mija. And when you get out, you'll see how good life can be on the other side. Jennifer pulled me aside and said, Eleanor, thank you. Thank you for creating this space. I was feeling so alone, thinking I was the only one going through this. I held her hands. You were never alone. There are millions of us. We just didn't know where to find each other. When everyone left, me, Isabel, and Gavin stayed in the library, looking at the empty chairs still with wrinkled pillows, half-drunk teacups, used tissues. You did something beautiful today, Eleanor, Gavin said, smiling. Isabel agreed. You transformed your pain into purpose. That's true power. And for the first time in a long time, I felt proud of myself. I started writing regularly. Not just for the group, but for myself. Diaries, reflections, small essays about abuse, control, liberation. Michael had forbidden me from writing years ago, saying it was a waste of time, that I had no talent. But now, each word I put on paper was an act of rebellion. It was a refusal to be silenced. It was my voice, finally free, finally mine. Isabel encouraged me, saying my words could help women I'd never meet personally. Publish online, Eleanor. Create a blog. Share your story. You can't imagine how many women need to read exactly what you have to say. The idea scared me, exposing myself publicly, putting myself vulnerable. What if Michael saw it? What if he used it against me? But then I remembered something Lenora Crawford wrote in her diary. Silence only protects abusers. Our voice protects future victims. And I decided yes, I would write. I would tell my story, not for revenge, but for liberation, mine and all the women who would come after. The Awakened Voices meetings became weekly. More women started showing up, some coming from shelters, others referred by therapists, some who simply saw the small ad we put up at the local church. Each meeting was different, but all had the same core: women supporting each other, sharing pain, planting hope. Sophie finally left. She showed up on a Friday with 2 suitcases and red eyes from crying, but with an expression of relief on her face. "I did it," she said, collapsing in my arms. "I actually did it." Tyler tried to stop her, of course. He called dozens of times, sent threatening messages, showed up at her work. But Sophie was prepared. She'd changed her number, got a restraining order, was temporarily living with a cousin. And most importantly, she wasn't alone. Awakened Voices had become her safety net. And seeing Sophie breaking free, partly because of the space we created, filled me with a feeling I couldn't name. It was bigger than happiness. It was purpose. It was the feeling that my life, finally, had meaning. But while I celebrated Sophie's freedom, part of me was still trapped because Michael was still out there, and his presence, even from a distance, still cast a shadow over everything. The question was, how much longer would I let that shadow define me, and what would be necessary to finally free myself completely, not just physically, but emotionally too? Marcus called me on a rainy Tuesday with news I didn't expect. "Eleanor, Michael accepted the settlement." My heart stopped for a second. "Accepted? Just like that, out of nowhere?" Marcus chuckled softly. "It wasn't out of nowhere. We applied legal pressure, threatened to expose the offshore accounts publicly, and suddenly he became very cooperative." There was a pause. "And there's more. It seems he's involved with someone else." Marcus's words echoed in my head. Someone else. Of course. Michael hadn't changed, hadn't learned, hadn't reflected on anything. He simply found a new victim, a new woman to control, manipulate, isolate. And suddenly, I didn't matter anymore. Not because he'd gotten over me, but because he'd found a replacement. I felt a strange mixture of relief and horror. Relief because this meant he'd finally leave me alone. Horror because another woman was about to live the hell I lived for 30 years. "Who is she?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Marcus sighed. "A co-worker of his, from what we managed to find out. Younger, recently divorced, apparently vulnerable." My stomach churned. Vulnerable. Exactly the type Michael looked for. Wounded women, insecure, needing saving. And he'd appear as the knight in shining armor, charming and attentive, until the cage door closed. "Should I warn her?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Marcus was kind but firm. "Eleanor, you can try, but in my experience, they never believe. Not until it's too late. She needs to discover it herself, just like you discovered." His words hurt, but I knew they were true. I wouldn't have believed if someone had warned me about Michael in the beginning. I would have thought they were jealous, dramatic, that they didn't know the real Michael. Because victims of narcissists only see the truth when they're ready. And forcing that awareness before time only makes them distance themselves more. Isabel found me in the library that afternoon, staring at nothing. "You're thinking about her," she said, sitting beside me. "About his new woman." I nodded. I should do something, shouldn't I? But at the same time, I know I can't save her. Only she can save herself. Isabel held my hand. "Eleanor, you're already doing something. Awakened Voices, your story, your courage. All of this is creating waves that will reach women you'll never meet. Maybe one day, this woman will need help and will find resources you helped create. That's how we break cycles, not by saving people individually, but by changing the whole system." That made sense in a deep way. I couldn't save every woman who fell into the clutches of men like Michael, but I could create spaces, share knowledge, plant seeds of awareness. And maybe, just maybe, those seeds would grow and save lives I'd never know about. The divorce signing was scheduled for a Thursday at the downtown Seattle courthouse. Marcus accompanied me, along with Isabel and Gavin. I didn't want to go alone, not because I was physically afraid of Michael, but because I knew seeing his face for the last time would be emotionally devastating in ways I couldn't predict. When we arrived at the courthouse, Michael was already there with his lawyer. He looked different, thinner, with deep, dark circles, wrinkled clothes. For a second, I felt a pang of something that could be compassion. But then he looked at me, and that look was empty, There was no love, no hate, nothing. I had become irrelevant to him, and that, strangely, was liberating. He no longer had power over me because he didn't care anymore. I was just a closed chapter while he already wrote the next one with another woman. And as sick as that was, it meant I was finally free. The process was quick and bureaucratic. We signed papers, the judge declared the divorce official, and that was it. 30 years of marriage ended in 15 minutes in a cold, impersonal courtroom. There was no drama, no tears, no meaningful last words. Michael left first, without looking back. His lawyer followed him quickly, probably relieved that everything had ended without more complications. I sat for a moment, processing. Marcus put his hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" I looked at him and smiled. Not a happy smile, but a smile of someone who survived something impossible. "I'm free," I answered. And for the first time, those words didn't come accompanied by fear or doubt. They were simply truth. I was free. Legally, emotionally, completely. Eleanor Harris was no longer Michael Harris's wife. She was just Eleanor Harris, and she had to rediscover who that person was. Isabel insisted we celebrate, so we went to a small, cozy restaurant in Queen Anne. It wasn't a loud or exaggerated celebration. It was quiet, reflective, loaded with meaning. Gavin raised his glass of wine. "To Eleanor, for having the courage to start over." Isabel added, "and for having the wisdom to transform pain into purpose." I raised my glass, feeling tears stream down. "And to you both, for saving me when I didn't even know I needed to be saved." We toasted, and in that moment, I felt something change inside me. It wasn't just the end of the marriage. It was the end of a version of me that had lived according to someone else. The Eleanor who put Michael first, who diminished herself to make him seem bigger, who silenced her own voice to not bother him. That Eleanor had died, and a new one was being born. Stronger, clearer, more whole. And this new Eleanor had work to do. She had stories to tell, women to help, cycles to break. That night, I went back to Lenora Crawford's diaries for the last time. I looked for the last entry, written shortly before her death at 83. "I lived a trapped life, but died free, and I leave for my daughters, granddaughters, and all the women who come after. Don't wait until death to find freedom. Seek it now, with ferocity, with courage, with the certainty that you deserve it." I closed the diary carefully, feeling the weight of that inheritance. Lenora didn't manage to completely free herself in life. Her time, her circumstances didn't allow it. But she left tools, left wisdom, left a map so others could do what she couldn't. And I was following that map. Not just following, I was expanding it, adding my own path, my own story, so that the next woman, and the next, would have more resources, more knowledge, more hope than I had when I started. Sophie showed up at the mansion that weekend, bringing flowers. "I heard the divorce was finalized. I came to celebrate with you." Her face was different, lighter, more relaxed. "How are you?" I asked. Sophie smiled, and it was genuine. "Better. Tyler still tries to contact me sometimes, but I've blocked all the ways. And you know what's amazing? For the first time in my life, I'm living alone. Just me, my books, my plants, and it's peaceful." I understood perfectly what she meant. Peace. Not the absence of problems, but the absence of constant fear. The freedom to be yourself without calculating every move. "And your elderly mother?" I asked. Sophie's eyes filled with tears. We reconciled. She forgave me for everything, said she just wanted me to be safe, and now we have lunch every Sunday. I heard that and felt pure joy. Sophie was rebuilding her life, reconnecting with people who truly loved her. She was breaking the isolation Tyler had built around her. She was healing. The Awakened Voices meetings kept growing. Now we had 15 regular women of all ages, all backgrounds. Some were still in abusive relationships, planning their escapes. Others had left years ago, but were still processing the trauma. And some, like me and Sophie, were in the middle, free, but still discovering who they were without the abuser defining their lives. Each woman brought her emotional story, unique but universally recognizable. And together, we were creating something powerful, a community of survivors who refused to remain victims. Isabel watched everything with quiet pride. One night, after everyone left, she told me, "Eleanor, you know what impresses me most? It's not just that you survived, it's that you took your survival and transformed it into salvation for others. That's extraordinary. I held her hand, that hand that had guided me through darkness. I learned from the best, I replied. But even with all the healing, all the community, all the purpose, there were moments when I still felt Michael's shadow. Not physically. He really had moved on. But emotionally, psychologically. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart racing, expecting to see him standing in the garden again. Sometimes I'd receive a message from an unknown number and panic before realizing it was just spam. The trauma didn't disappear overnight. Dr. Rachel, my therapist, reminded me this was normal. You lived 30 years on constant alert, Eleanor. Your nervous system needs time to understand it's safe now. And I was working on it. Meditation, therapy, breathing exercises, everything. But progress was slow, non-linear, frustrating. Some days I felt invincible. Other days, I still felt like that drenched woman in the parking lot, waiting for someone to save her. The difference was that now I knew that even on bad days, I was stronger than Michael ever was. Because real strength isn't about controlling others. It's about controlling yourself, about choosing to grow instead of destroy, about transforming pain into something that illuminates instead of burns. And in that aspect, I had won. But there was still one last step in my journey. Something Isabel had been hinting at for weeks. Something that scared and excited me at the same time. And I was about to discover what it was. Isabel woke me early on a December morning. Seattle winter had arrived with force. The air was freezing, the sky was gray, but there was something comforting in that cold, something that made me feel alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. Eleanor, wear something comfortable. I have something to show you. Her voice carried a mixture of mystery and emotion that sparked my curiosity. I went down to breakfast, where Gavin had already prepared pancakes and fresh coffee. "Good morning, adventurer," he said with a smile. "Isabel is planning something special today." I ate quickly, anticipation growing with each minute. When I finished, Isabel took me by the hand, that simple gesture she did so naturally even without seeing, and guided me through the mansion's staircases. We went up, until we reached a door I'd never seen open. "The attic?" I asked, confused. Isabel smiled. "It's not just an attic, dear. It's a sanctuary." And she opened the door. The morning light came through a large skylight, illuminating a space that took my breath away. It wasn't a dusty, abandoned attic. It was a studio. There was an antique dark wood desk, a reading armchair near the window, shelves full of books, frames on the walls showing strong women from different eras, and in the center of the room, covered by a red velvet cloth, there was something I couldn't identify. "This was Lenora's space," Isabel explained, her voice soft but loaded with emotion. "After her, it was my mother Margaret's, then mine, before I lost my sight. And now," she paused, turning her face in my direction, "now it's yours, if you want it." Tears immediately filled my eyes. That space wasn't just a room. It was a legacy. It was the passing of strength from one generation of women to the next, and Isabel was including me in that lineage, considering me worthy. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. Isabel walked to the covered object in the center of the room. Her hands, always so precise despite blindness, found the velvet cloth and pulled it slowly. And there, revealed by the soft morning light, was an antique mirror. It wasn't big, maybe a meter tall, but it was absolutely stunning. The frame was hand-carved wood, with designs of flowers, birds, and women dancing. The glass was old but impeccably preserved, slightly yellowed by time. "This mirror," Isabel began, caressing the frame with reverence, "belonged to Lenora. She used to look at herself in it every morning and tell herself, 'You are strong, you are capable, you deserve more.' Even when she didn't believe it, she'd say it, until one day she finally believed." Isabel turned her face to me, and there were tears in her eyes, too. "After Lenora died, my mother used the same mirror, and then me. And now, Eleanor, it's yours." I approached the mirror slowly, almost afraid to touch it. It was more than an object, it was a symbol. It represented generations of Crawford women who had faced their own battles, their own demons, their own versions of Michael. And all had survived. All had left something behind. Diaries, wisdom, strength. I looked at my reflection, And for the first time in a long time, I really saw myself. Not Michael's wife, not the victim, not the broken woman. I saw Eleanor Harris, a survivor, a warrior, a woman who had gone through fire and come out transformed. My hair was different now, shorter, freer. My eyes had a light that didn't exist before. And my face? There were lines of suffering, yes, but also lines of courage. She's different, I murmured, touching the cold glass. The woman in the mirror. She's different from who I was. Isabel put her hand on my shoulder. Because you're different. You were reborn, Eleanor. Isabel told me the complete story of the mirror while we sat in the reading armchair side by side. Lenora had received that mirror as a wedding gift in 1919. In the first years, she hated it because every time she looked at herself, she saw a scared, small, trapped woman. But then something changed. She started using the mirror not to see herself as she was, but to see herself as she wanted to be. She practiced having a voice, Isabel explained. She'd stand in front of the mirror and say the things she wanted to say to her husband, but didn't have courage. She practiced being strong until one day, strength stopped being practice and became real. That gave me chills, because I'd done the same thing, even without realizing. Every time I told my story at Awakened Voices, every time I counseled Sophie or other women, I was practicing being the person I wanted to be. And little by little, practice became reality. I was no longer pretending to be strong. I was strong. And the mirror was witness to that transformation. There's something else, Isabel said, her voice becoming more serious. She stood and walked to the desk, opening a drawer with impressive familiarity. From inside, she took out an envelope yellowed by time. This is from Lenora, a letter she wrote for the next woman who needs this space. My mother read it when Lenora died. I read it when my mother died. And now, it's your turn. I held the envelope with trembling hands. It was heavy, thick, old paper. I opened it carefully, removing pages written by hand in elegant calligraphy. And I started reading aloud, so Isabel could hear too. To you who are reading this, I know you're in pain. I know you're scared. I know there are days when you want to give up, go back, accept the prison because it seems easier than fighting for freedom. But I'm here, through time, to say, don't give up. You're stronger than you imagine, and your story doesn't end with him. It only begins when you finally break free. I continued reading, with tears flowing freely now. I use this mirror to remind myself of who I was before he made me forget, and I want you to do the same. Look at yourself every day and say, I am enough. I deserve real love. I deserve peace. Say it even when you don't believe it, because one day, suddenly, you'll believe it. And on that day, you'll understand that the mirror never changed. You changed. The reflection just showed what was always there, an unbreakable woman. I paused, breathing deeply to control emotion. And when you're healed, when you're strong again, don't keep that strength just for yourself. Pass it forward. Help the next woman, and the next, and the next. Because that's how we break these cycles, not alone, but together. A chain of courage that crosses generations, connecting mothers and daughters, grandmothers and granddaughters, strangers who become sisters through shared pain and collective strength. This mirror is yours now. Use it well. With love and hope, Lenora Crawford, 1954. When I finished reading, the silence in the studio was sacred. I held the letter against my chest, feeling the weight of those words written 70 years ago, but that seemed to have been written yesterday, for me specifically. Isabel had tears streaming down her face, and I realized that letter moved her as much as me, even having read it before. Do you understand now? Isabel asked softly. The real mirror isn't this glass and wood object. It's the women you help, Eleanor. Every time Sophie looks at you and sees hope, you're a mirror. Every time a woman at Awakened Voices shares her story because you shared yours first, you're a mirror. You reflect back to them the strength they don't know they have. I looked at the antique mirror, then at Isabel, then at the letter in my hands, and I understood. My journey was never just about me. It was always about something bigger, a chain of women, separated by time but united by experience, each leaving tools for the next. And now it was my turn to leave my mark on that chain. Isabel, I began, my voice choked but determined. You saved me that night in the rain, but it wasn't just physical rescue. You gave me something nobody had ever given me. You gave me permission to be myself, to be angry, to take up space, to exist without apologizing. Isabel smiled, that wise and gentle smile I'd learned to love. I didn't save you, dear. I just showed you the door. You were the one who had courage to cross it. I hugged her tight, feeling deep gratitude for that extraordinary woman who, despite not seeing with her eyes, saw everything with her heart. I'm going to use this space, I promised. I'm going to write here, help other women here, honor the legacy of Lenora and all the Crawford women who came before. Isabel nodded. I know you will. And one day, when it's your time, you'll pass this mirror forward. To the next Eleanor. To the next woman who needs to remember she's unbreakable. And in that moment, in the gentle silence of the studio, surrounded by generations of feminine strength, I finally understood. My story wasn't about being Michael's victim. It was about becoming a survivor, about becoming a guide, about becoming part of something eternal and bigger than any abuse could destroy. And it was there, in that silent studio of the Crawford mansion, holding a letter written 70 years ago by a woman I never met but who perfectly understood my pain, that I realized something fundamental. Our stories never end with us. They transform into beacons for other women lost in darkness. Each scar I carry now has purpose. Each tear shed transformed into strength to help Sophie, Maria, Jennifer, and all the others who will still come. Michael tried to erase me, control me, make me disappear. But what he didn't understand is that women like us don't break. We transform. And now, when I look at myself in Lenora Crawford's mirror, I no longer see the scared woman who was abandoned in the rain. I see a survivor. I see a warrior. I see someone who took the worst thing that ever happened to her and transformed it into salvation for others. And you? Have you gone through something similar? Do you know someone who's living trapped in a relationship like this? What would you do if you were in Eleanor's place, or Sophie's, or any of these brave women? Your story also matters, and your voice also deserves to be heard. If this emotional story touched your heart, if you felt each word, each fear, each victory along with Eleanor, subscribe to the channel and turn on the bell so you don't miss other stories that bring deep life lessons and make us reflect on our own choices, relationships, and the importance of never silencing our voice. Because together, we create that chain of courage Lenora wrote about, a chain that crosses generations and that can save the next woman who needs to remember she's unbreakable. Until the next story, bye.